If your life feels measured in dates on a calendar, paydays circled, bills counted down, relief that never lasts, pause here. This message is not for someday when things improve. It is for now, when you are tired of surviving between numbers and ready to change the pattern that keeps repeating. Living from one payment to the next does something quiet to the mind. It trains you to expect delay, shortage, and just enough to get by. You may not notice it happening, but expectation becomes habit, and habit, once accepted, is faithfully obeyed by life without question. Most people think money problems begin in their bank account. They do not. They begin in the way a person positions themselves toward supply. The outer figures only reflect an inner stance that has been rehearsed for a long time, usually without intention. You may say, "This is just being realistic." But realism that keeps you confined is not wisdom. It is agreement with limitation. There is a difference between acknowledging a moment and living inside it. One observes, the other obeys. When someone lives payment to payment, they often wait for proof before they relax, proof before they trust, proof before they expect ease. But the law works in reverse. Ease follows expectation. Supply follows assumption. An assumption is chosen long before evidence appears. Acting as if you are already rich does not mean pretending bills do not exist. It means refusing to let them define who you are. It means inwardly identifying with provision rather than pressure. Even when circumstances have not yet caught up, there is a quiet confidence that changes everything. It does not announce itself. It does not argue. It simply assumes support. When you adopt that posture, life reorganizes itself to match it, because life always moves to justify what you believe to be true. Many people unknowingly worship their problems by talking about them constantly. They repeat the story. They rehearse the shortage. They explain it to themselves and others. Every explanation strengthens the pattern and convinces life that this arrangement is acceptable. What would happen if, instead of rehearsing lack, you rehearsed trust? Not loudly, not dramatically, just inwardly. What if you began to expect solutions before seeing them, support before needing to beg for it, supply before desperation arrives? The moment you act as if you are already rich, something shifts internally. The body relaxes, the mind loosens, creativity wakes up. Richness is not only money, it is orientation. From that orientation, money finds pathways that were previously invisible. You may fear disappointment. You may fear hoping again. That fear is understandable. But hope does not disappoint. Misplaced effort does. Trust aligned with law does not fail. It simply unfolds in ways the mind could never predict. Notice how people who expect support often receive it easily. Doors open. Help arrives. Timing works. They are not lucky, they are aligned. They have already agreed inwardly to a different standard, and life responds without delay. Acting as if you are already rich begins with how you think, speak, and expect when no one is watching. It is choosing dignity over panic, calm over urgency, faith over constant calculation. These choices feel small, but they command enormous authority. You are not meant to live from one payment to the next forever. That rhythm is not destiny, it is conditioning. Conditioning can be released the moment you stop identifying with it. Identity is more powerful than income, because income follows identity. As you listen, you are not being asked to force belief. You are being invited to shift position, to stop standing in expectation of lack and step into assumption of provision. Life adjusts quickly to that change. Stay with this message. Let it work beneath the surface. You do not need to announce your shift. quiet agreement carries more power than spoken struggle. Something new is being authorized now. Listen closely. The pattern is breaking not by effort, but by alignment. I have often said that a person does not live from their paycheck, they live from their consciousness. And as I speak to you now, I am thinking of the countless men and women who have come to me with the same sorrowful confession. Mrs. Shinn, I am always waiting for the next payday. I breathe for a moment when the check arrives, and then I hold my breath until the next one. Their words were spoken with heaviness, but more importantly, they were spoken with authority, for every word we utter is a decree. And when a person decrees lack, even in the tone of honesty, life must obey. Life is like a loyal servant blind to emotion, but keen to command. It hears only the instruction, never the explanation. You may believe you describe your condition when you say, I cannot get ahead, but you decree it. You may think you confess truth when you say, my money never stretches far enough, but you authorize a pattern. I want you to grasp this with every fiber of your being. Your present condition did not begin with the paycheck. It began with the prophecy spoken over the paycheck. Many have lived so long in expectation of shortage that they have forgotten what it is to expect anything else. Their nervous systems have been trained to brace each month, to flinch at every envelope, to measure the days by dread instead of by delight. And so the pattern repeats itself, not because divine mind wills limitation, but because fear has been enthroned as the ruler of their affairs. I recall a woman who sat before me, her hands tightly clasped, her face marked by years of financial tension. She said, I always run out of money the day before I am paid. She believed this to be a curious misfortune, a kind of personal irony. But the moment she spoke, I heard the true cause. She repeated it constantly. She had made a covenant with that very condition, and life, ever obedient, fulfilled her decree with astonishing precision. I said to her, my dear, you have been writing your own script, and life has been performing it faithfully. She looked startled, for she had never considered that words whispered in frustration become spiritual orders. I instructed her to reverse her decree and affirm instead, my supply meets me at every turn. I am always provided for. She obeyed, though without confidence. Yet the subconscious does not require confidence. It requires repetition. Within a short time, she reported that her money not only lasted but began to multiply. The pattern broke because the decree broke. Living from one payment to the next is not a financial problem. It is a habitual allegiance to limited expectation. A person may earn a great deal and yet remain poor in consciousness. Another may earn modestly and yet move in abundance, because their trust is not in wages, but in divine source. I have known wealthy men who trembled at every market turn, and modest women who walked serenely through life with no fear of want. The distinction is never the number. It is the nucleus of thought. Divine mind is unlimited. Only the mind of man imposes ceilings. There is a subtle danger in what many call realism. Realism, as practiced by the world, is often nothing more than fear clothed in respectability. It says, I must be practical, when it truly means, I dare not expect more. It says, I cannot afford this, when it truly means, I cannot imagine provision beyond my salary. But realism without faith is only a more polished form of spiritual poverty. It does not reflect truth. It reflects habitual agreement with appearances. There is a difference, a great difference, between acknowledging that a condition exists and identifying yourself with that condition. Moses saw the Red Sea before him and the army behind him, but he did not say, this is my fate. He lifted his consciousness above the appearance, and the appearance bowed to that higher law. You must do the same. You may observe a temporary challenge, but you must not make it your identity. Say, "This is a passing shadow, not my reality. My supply is secure." Your spoken word becomes the rod that parts your own Red Sea. Most people wait for proof before they relax, proof before they trust, proof before they expect something good. But the law works in the opposite direction. Proof follows expectation. Supply follows assumption. The subconscious does not act when it sees results. It acts when it receives instruction. I have often told seekers, act as if you already have the blessing, and the blessing will hasten to meet your action. Divine law delights in faith. It rushes to co-create with the one who claims what is theirs. Acting as if you are already rich does not mean reckless spending. It means refusing to rehearse poverty with your words or posture. It means walking with dignity instead of with dread. It means knowing your supply is not confined to a job, a number, or a paycheck. When you carry yourself as one who is provided for, others notice. They feel your steadiness. They sense your confidence. They begin to treat you with a respect that once seemed distant. Prosperity consciousness becomes visible long before the money appears. I once consulted with a seamstress who had the habit of sighing deeply each time she was paid. She would fold the bills and say, "Here today, gone tomorrow." I told her, "With such a decree, what else can your money do but obey?" I instructed her to bless each payment and say, "You increase and return multiplied." She laughed at the idea, but she obeyed. Within months, her work increased. Clients referred new clients. Her prices rose naturally, and she stood before me, glowing with relief. She said, "It feels as though money has finally decided to stay with me." I replied, "It had no freedom to stay until you freed your decree." I want you to picture something now. Imagine standing in your kitchen, perhaps late at night, the house quiet, the weight of unpaid bills nearby. You feel the familiar tightening in your chest, the whisper of anxiety saying, "I will never get ahead." But instead of repeating that old decree, imagine pausing, truly pausing. Imagine saying aloud, "I refuse to speak poverty any longer. I align myself with divine abundance." The air around you changes. The vibration shifts. You have thrown down an old idol and raised a new banner. In that moment, your subconscious listens. It tilts its ear toward your word. It says, "A new command has been given," and the entire machinery of divine order begins to rearrange itself to fulfill that command. Invisible channels widen. Ideas begin forming in the unseen. People who once overlooked you begin to remember you. Opportunities that were blocked start seeking entry. The change may not yet be visible, but it is inevitable. I have seen this too many times to doubt it. A man once came to me who lived perpetually in the shadow of overdue notices. He said, "Mrs. Shinn, I cannot remember a month without dread." I told him he must silence the inner narrator who rehearsed catastrophe. I asked him to speak instead. "Every day, in every way, my supply increases." He thought it impossible, but the law does not require belief. It requires obedience. Within weeks, he found himself promoted at his workplace. He carried himself with a new posture, a lifted chin, a brighter eye. People responded to him differently because he responded to life differently. This is the great secret. As your inner posture changes, your outer world salutes it. The habit of speaking poverty is not an innocent habit. It is a spiritual contract. But contracts can be broken when the signer chooses a higher truth. You must break the contract now. Do not speak limitations, even in jest. Do not say, "I'm barely making it," for the universe does not understand jokes. Do not say, "Money is so scarce," for scarcity is not a divine attribute. Say instead, my supply is abundant and secure. What is mine comes to me quickly and clearly. Let me take you even deeper. You may not yet realize it, but living from payment to payment affects more than your finances. It affects your identity. It teaches you to shrink your desires. It trains you to second guess your intuition. It instructs you to settle instead of to claim. And when a person lives in this consciousness long enough, they begin to forget who they are. They forget they are heirs to divine supply. They forget they are children of the infinite. But the moment they lift their thought even a little, the truth rushes in like sunlight through a crack. This lifting of thought is happening in you now. You may feel a soft sense of possibility rising. These are not fleeting emotions. They are signals that the subconscious has begun to release the old program. It is preparing itself to receive a higher decree. Before this section closes, let me place in your hands a set of words that will begin dissolving the old pattern that bound you. I refuse to crown appearances as authority. My supply flows from divine source, not from wages. I am always provided for, under grace, and in perfect ways. My words open the gates of abundance. Speak them calmly, but with conviction. Speak them especially when fear rises. Speak them as one who commands, rather than one who pleads. For the universe does not respond to pleading. It responds to knowing. You are stepping now into a new consciousness, one in which money is no longer a tyrant, but a servant. One in which paydays are blessings, not lifelines. One in which your identity is no longer shaped by fear, but by divine truth. The pattern of living from one payment to the next is already cracking. Soon, it will crumble entirely. Your new life has already begun. There is a great spiritual turning that occurs when a person stops asking, "How can I escape lack?" and begins instead to ask, "Who must I become so that lack can no longer find me?" This question marks the dawn of wealth consciousness. For prosperity is never the result of labor alone. It is the natural expression of identity. A man will always act like the person he believes himself to be, and life will always present conditions that match this belief. If one sees himself as limited, even the largest opportunities pass him by unnoticed. If one sees himself as prosperous, even the smallest door becomes the gateway to expansion. You must therefore become the one who receives before you receive, for outer wealth always arranges itself around inner certainty. I once counseled a young clerk who longed for greater opportunities, yet believed himself unworthy of them. He said, "I am only a clerk." I replied, "You are only a clerk because you see yourself as one." I instructed him to begin affirming, "I am trusted, I am capable, I am worthy of advancement." At first, he spoke as though imitating someone else's voice, for the words felt foreign. But the subconscious does not require familiarity. It requires acceptance. Soon, he began carrying himself differently. He walked with purpose, spoke with confidence, and became attentive to ideas that once seemed beyond him. Others noticed. His employer, who had overlooked him for years, suddenly said, "There is something dependable about you," and placed him in charge of a new division. Eventually, he became partner in the firm he once served timidly. Nothing changed in his talents. Everything changed in his identity. This is the invisible architecture of prosperity. Wealth does not come to the fearful or to the anxious. It comes to the one who stands as though already provided for. Do not mistake this for arrogance. True confidence is humility aligned with truth. It says, "I am, as God made me capable, supplied, guided, and worthy." Wealth consciousness is not boastful. It is restful. It does not strain to impress. It quietly assumes its place. There is a scripture that says, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." It does not say, "as a man wishes," nor "as a man tries," nor "as a man fears," but "as he thinketh in his heart," that is, the place where identity dwells. A person may outwardly desire abundance, but if inwardly they identify with want, the desire cannot take form. The heart writes the blueprint. The outer world simply builds from it. Therefore, if you wish to break the pattern of living from one payment to the next, you must tear up the old blueprint, the one etched by years of worry, apology, hesitation, and self-depreciation, and draw a new one. Identity cannot be transformed by effort, but by recognition. Most people see themselves as small because they have forgotten the magnitude of the spirit within them. They see themselves as beggars instead of heirs, as strivers instead of receivers, as employees of circumstances instead of partners with the infinite. Yet the instant a person remembers their divine heritage, something magnificent occurs. They stop groveling before appearances and begin commanding them. They cease asking life for mercy and begin speaking to life as one who understands the laws that govern it. There was once a woman who earned a modest salary yet carried herself with remarkable dignity. She never spoke lack. She never apologized for her desires. She never allowed fear to stiffen her voice. Instead, she lived as though she were already provided for. I observed that people treated her accordingly. Storekeepers offered her the best service. Employers gave her the most favorable assignments, and friends entrusted her with opportunities. One day, she said to me, "Money seems to flow to me without struggle." And I answered, "It flows because you have taken on the identity of one to whom money naturally belongs." She later received an inheritance, a promotion, and a series of blessings that astonished even those who knew her well. But I was not astonished, for her consciousness had long claimed what her affairs eventually displayed. When you act as if you are already rich, you are not pretending. You are positioning yourself in the correct vibration. Pretending is rooted in fear. Positioning is rooted in truth. A person who pretends will falter when appearances contradict their hope. But a person who stands in identity will remain unmoved even when appearances test their patience. Acting as if you are already prosperous means carrying yourself with quiet assurance, not indulging in dramatic spending or rash choices. It means selecting words that reflect the divine pattern rather than the temporary condition. It means refusing to bend your head before bills, refusing to tremble before numbers, refusing to let society dictate the limits of your success. When you shift your identity, you shift your posture, your physical posture, your emotional posture, and your spiritual posture. Prosperity has a posture: calm shoulders, steady breath, lifted gaze. Poverty has a posture as well: tightened muscles, hurried steps, a downward glance that anticipates disappointment. People around you read your posture long before they hear your words. They sense whether you believe in yourself or fear for yourself. They respond accordingly. When you carry yourself as one who expects good, good rushes toward you. Opportunities seek you out. Employers notice you. Helpers appear. Strangers respond with unexpected kindness. Your environment rearranges itself to reflect your new assumption. A man once approached me saying, "I am tired of feeling insignificant." I told him, "You are not insignificant. You are simply underdressed in consciousness." I taught him to dress himself each morning in the invisible garments of confidence, worthiness, and divine favor. I said, "As you put on your coat, put on your identity. As you put on your shoes, put on your expectation." He did so, and soon he found himself speaking with greater assurance. People treated him differently. He said, It is as though I have become visible. And I replied, you were always visible in divine mind. Now you are visible to yourself. Identity is the magnet that either repels or attracts supply. A person who sees themselves as a struggler will always struggle, even with increased income. A person who sees themselves as prosperous will prosper, even through humble beginnings. Your finances can rise only to the level of your self-concept. Lift the concept, and the finances must follow. Lower the concept, and no amount of income will feel like enough. Let me illustrate this with another case. A school teacher once came to me troubled that her salary would never allow her to experience the life she desired. Yet she spoke of herself as though she were destined for limitation. I instructed her to affirm, my work blesses me. My gifts make way for me. My supply is unlimited. She looked doubtful but faithful. Within a year, she received a grant, then an unexpected offer to travel, then an inheritance that allowed her to live with greater ease. She said, I do not know where all of this came from. And I said, it came from the consciousness you agreed to become. Others begin to admire the one who walks in wealthy identity. They sense something reliable and anchored, as though your life is held by a force beyond circumstances. They speak to you differently, consult you more readily, offer you their trust, their resources, even their introductions. People are naturally drawn to stability, and prosperity consciousness is the ultimate stability. The knowledge that one's good comes from divine mind, not from the whims of the world. When you adopt the identity of the prosperous, even in the quiet of your own mind, a miraculous transformation takes place. The old fears begin to dissolve because they no longer have permission to anchor themselves. Every time you say, I am prosperous, the subconscious receives a blueprint. Every time you say, I am provided for, it rearranges the architecture of your experience. Every time you say, what I seek is already seeking me, the universe rushes to fulfill the promise. I want you to consider how you rise in the morning. Do you rise as one bracing for difficulty, or as one expecting blessings? Do you walk through your day with hurried desperation, or with calm certainty? The way you move physically reveals the identity you hold spiritually. Lift your inner countenance, and your outer countenance will follow. Lift your speech, and your circumstances will follow. Lift your expectation, and the entire rhythm of your life will change. Before this section closes, let me place new words in your hands, words that will shape the identity you are now stepping into. I am aligned with my divine supply. My life expands as I expand. I walk in the vibration of abundance. Every day, I become more of who I truly am. Speak them gently. Speak them deeply. Speak them until they feel as natural as breathing. For you are not becoming prosperous. You are prosperous. You are simply remembering what the world taught you to forget. When identity is restored, supply follows. It must. It is law. There comes a turning point in every seeker's life when they discover that poverty is not a condition, but a conversation, an ongoing dialogue they have been holding with themselves, with others, and with life itself. The great tragedy is that most people do not realize they are speaking poverty until its harvest appears. They believe they are merely describing their experience, when in truth, they are authoring it. Words spoken casually become laws, enacted strictly, for the subconscious does not distinguish between jest and decree. It accepts every phrase as instruction, and so the world returns to them precisely the pattern they have sown with their tongue. I often tell seekers, your word is your wand, and most recite it like poetry, yet forget that a wand does not ask, it commands. You may not realize how often you have spoken poverty. The words fall so easily, so familiarly that they slip past awareness. Money is tight. I never get ahead. Life is expensive. I can't afford it. These phrases seem harmless, but they are the seals that bind conditions in place. I once knew a man who habitually said, "Money slips through my hands," and indeed, it did. No matter how much he earned, unexpected expenses arose. Car repairs, medical bills, broken appliances, always enough to drain his supply. He stood bewildered before me, saying, "It feels like I am cursed." I replied gently, "My dear, you placed the curse upon yourself, and because you spoke it with conviction, life hastened to obey." When I instructed him to stop repeating this phrase and begin affirming, "Money stays with me, money increases for me, money blesses me," the entire pattern dissolved. Within months, he experienced financial steadiness he had never known. He said, "It feels as though life stopped chasing me." And I answered, "No, you stopped running from abundance with your own tongue." Poverty follows those who call its name. Abundance follows those who call its name. You must understand this. The tongue is not a reporter. It is a creator. Many people believe they are obligated to speak what they see, but spiritual law teaches the reverse. You speak what you choose to create. Appearances are merely the echo of yesterday's decrees. If you speak lack today, it must appear in the future. If you speak abundance today, it must appear in the future. Your words walk ahead of you, preparing your world. This is why I teach the principle of the watchman at the gate. You must appoint a watchman over your own mind, an inner sentinel who discerns which words you allow to cross the threshold of your lips. Poverty is not only spoken outwardly, it is reinforced inwardly. The inner mutterings, the whispered fears, the unspoken dread, all rise like smoke before the subconscious, and the subconscious shapes from that smoke the very structure of your experience. Therefore, the watchman must guard not only the tongue but the silent thought. I once counseled a woman who insisted she never spoke poverty aloud, yet every time she opened her purse, she sighed. Every time she looked at a bill, she whispered, "Oh dear." Every time she thought of her future, she pictured struggle. These were her decrees, though they never reached her lips. The subconscious hears the faintest whisper. It hears the subtle wince. It hears the quiet, inward complaint, and it creates accordingly. I instructed her to stop sighing over her purse and to begin blessing it instead. "Bless it each time you touch it," I said. "Say, 'My purse is full, my purse is blessed, my purse is replenished.'" She obeyed. Soon her income increased, her debts shrank, and she walked with new dignity. She learned what many never learn, that one need not shout a decree. A whisper is enough. The most dangerous form of poverty speech is the speech disguised as realism. People confess their limitations to one another as a form of bonding. They speak of rising prices, of upcoming bills, of how nothing comes easily. These conversations may appear harmless, but they reinforce the very patterns the speaker hopes to escape. When two people speak of shortage together, they create a partnership of lack. The subconscious takes the collective agreement as confirmation. It says, "This is the world they believe in," and it shapes that world accordingly. You must withdraw from such conversations, not with judgment, not with superiority, but with inner silence. When others speak of lack, bless them inwardly and hold to your truth. If required to respond, offer a neutral word or quietly change the subject. To argue is unnecessary. To agree is dangerous. You owe no loyalty to the vibration of poverty. You owe loyalty only to your divine inheritance. Let me tell you a story of a man who unknowingly reinforced his scarcity through humor. He would say, "If there is a wrong turn, I'll take it. If there is a bill, it's mine." He believed he was being witty, but the subconscious has no sense of humor. It engraved his words as law. His life became a series of missteps and unexpected charges. When he came to me despairing, I said, "My dear, you jested your way into lack." I instructed him to adopt new humor, lightness, rooted in truth, rather than defeat. He began saying, "Everything works in my favor. My steps are guided. Blessings follow me." His life shifted so rapidly that his friends joked, "You are the luckiest man alive." He replied, "No, I simply changed my script. You too must change your script. If you have been living from payment to payment, it is because your words have been living from payment to payment. You have renewed the old contract each time you said, 'I am just getting by.' But the moment you revoke that decree and replace it with truth, the contract dissolves." Let me bring in a scriptural picture, for spiritual law is woven through every holy text. When Joshua faced the walls of Jericho, the walls did not fall because he stared at them. They fell because he spoke and obeyed the divine command. Words marched around those walls. Words shook their foundations. Words brought them down. The walls of lack and limitation in your life are no different. They do not dissolve when you describe them. They dissolve when you speak with authority over them. "I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free." This sentence alone, spoken faithfully, has dissolved more financial fear than any ledger or budget ever could. It releases the subconscious from the burden of worry and places responsibility in the hands of infinite intelligence. And when divine intelligence takes over, the most tangled affairs untangle themselves. But some people cling tightly to their grievances and fears, repeating them like incantations. They say, "I always struggle. I can never afford anything nice. Something always goes wrong." And life, hearing these commands, says, "Very well, if that is your decree, then that shall be your demonstration." Words are never idle. They are seeds. And a seed of lack will always bear fruit according to its kind. Yet the moment a person begins to speak differently, even timidly, the entire garden of their life changes. A woman once told me, "I began blessing my bills, blessing my purse, blessing my bank account even when the numbers frightened me." She said, "At first it felt foolish, but soon it felt powerful." Within months, she received unexpected gifts, refunds, and opportunities. She said, "It is as though the bills have lost their bite." And I told her, "They have lost their bite because you have withdrawn your fear from them. You have replaced your old decree with a new one." Others will sense your new language long before they hear it. As you stop speaking hardship, your posture shifts, your voice steadies, your presence becomes peaceful. People begin to treat you as one who carries authority. Employers offer you better roles. Clients trust you more readily. Friends ask your counsel. Poverty speech causes others to doubt your stability. Abundance speech inspires others to believe in your capacity. Your world changes because you change. Before this part closes, let me give you a set of powerful replacements for the phrases you must retire. Instead of, "I can't afford it," say, "If it is mine, it comes in perfect ways." Instead of "money is tight," say, "My supply flows freely." Instead of "I need a miracle," say, "My good is inevitable." Instead of "I never get ahead," say, "I advance under grace." These words carry the vibration of truth. Repeat them until the subconscious knows no other song. You are no longer permitted to speak poverty, not because you will be punished, but because you are awakening. And awakened ones do not curse themselves with their own tongues. They speak life. They speak increase. They speak possibility. Your new language is already rewriting your future. Your new decrees are already summoning new supply. Your new voice is already closing the chapter of scarcity. For poverty cannot remain where truth is spoken. It has no soil there, no shelter, no claim. And you, by your word alone, are driving it out. There is a sacred current that runs beneath the noise of daily life, a quiet river of guidance that never forces, never argues, never insists, yet always knows the perfect next step. Most people never discover this river because they are too busy splashing about in the shallow waters of worry. Worry makes such a commotion that one cannot hear the voice of intuition, which speaks softly, in stillness. Yet intuition is the very faculty through which supply reaches you. For divine mind does not shout across the landscape of fear. It whispers along the path of trust. When a person lives from one payment to the next, intuition grows faint, not because it withdraws, but because fear grows loud. Fear is an impostor that poses as wisdom, screaming, "Hurry! Struggle! Control!" But intuition speaks differently. It says, "Be still, listen, follow the lightest step." And once you begin to recognize this difference, your entire relationship with supply transforms. You cease trying to force your prosperity into being. You let it unfold under grace. I often compare intuition to the pillar of cloud and fire that guided the Israelites through the wilderness. It did not tell them the entire path. Those who attempted to run ahead, demanding full knowledge before obedience, found themselves lost. But those who obeyed the next indication found themselves protected from enemies, refreshed in barren places, and supplied by manna they could not have foreseen. Such is the nature of intuition. It gives you only enough light for the next step, because the next step is all that is required. I once counseled a woman who was deeply burdened by her financial situation. She dreaded going to her job each day, yet feared leaving it. I told her to bless her current position, cease speaking against it, and then listen quietly each morning for the smallest nudge. One day, she felt an inexplicable urge to walk a different route home. She obeyed, though the prompting made no sense. On that very route, she met an acquaintance she had not seen in years, who mentioned an opening at a firm perfectly suited to her talents. She applied, was hired, and her income increased substantially. She said, "It happened so naturally, it felt almost accidental." And I replied, "There are no accidents in divine order. You followed the magic path of intuition." The magic path of intuition does not require strain, it requires surrender. Most people think surrender means weakness, but spiritual surrender is the most powerful act of all. It is saying, "I remove my frantic will and allow infinite intelligence to take the lead." And when this happens, everything begins to move at once. Phone calls come, doors open, ideas arrive like birds returning at dawn. The very atmosphere around you shifts, and life begins to treat you differently because you are no longer pushing, you are aligning. Let me give you another story, for stories make these invisible laws visible. A man once came to me with a decision weighing heavily upon him. He feared making the wrong choice, feared losing money, feared looking foolish. I said, "You must remove fear first. Fear is static in the telephone line between you and divine mind." I told him to declare, "Right action is mine. Intuition now reveals the perfect path." He repeated this until his fear quieted. Then he felt a gentle inner knowing, nothing dramatic, nothing urgent, just a sense of correctness about one option. He said, "It felt as though something guided my steps." And indeed, Something did. This is how intuition works. It is not dramatic. It does not compel. It invites. It nudges. It lights a single lantern at a time. And the moment you obey its quiet prompting, the next lantern is lit. Soon you are walking a path that seems almost enchanted, for every step feels supported by a hand you cannot see. People often ask me, how do I know the difference between intuition and fear? Intuition is calm. Fear is urgent. Intuition feels like light. Fear feels like heaviness. Intuition says, proceed. All is well. Fear says, hurry or you will lose. Intuition often feels like a mild inclination. Nothing loud. Nothing insistent, because truth does not need to raise its voice. It knows it will be followed by the one who recognizes it. When you are attuned to intuition, supply finds you through channels you could never have predicted. You may receive an inspired idea while washing dishes. You may recall a forgotten contact. You may feel led to open a certain book, visit a certain place, or speak a word to someone at just the right moment. These are not coincidences. They are divine appointments. I once advised a woman to bless her bills and declare that new supply would reach her. The very next day, she felt a faint urge to look inside an envelope she had previously discarded as junk mail. It contained a check she did not expect. She said, "How did I know to open it?" And I replied, "Your intuition knew." Others begin to treat you differently when you follow intuition. They sense a new steadiness within you, for intuition aligns you with divine timing. People trust those who move at the right time, who speak at the right moment, who pause when others rush, and who act when others hesitate. It is not charisma, it is consciousness. Intuition makes you appear guided because you are guided. Let me bring in another biblical picture, for Scripture is full of metaphysical truth. When Elijah was instructed to go to the brook Cherith, he obeyed without asking how he would be fed, and ravens brought him food. When the brook dried, he was instructed to go to Zarephath, and there a widow sustained him. If he had doubted, reasoned, or tarried, he would have missed both channels. Intuition is like this. It leads you from one station of supply to another, and though the channels may change, the source remains unfailing. The greatest difficulty most people face is not a lack of guidance, it is a refusal to follow simple guidance because it seems too small, too ordinary, or too insignificant to matter. But prosperity often enters through humble doors. A single conversation, a single errand, a single thought can contain the seed of great increase. I once told a seeker, "Never despise a nudge. The nudge is the whisper of the infinite." When you are living from payment to payment, intuition will often speak to you about small matters. How to save money gracefully, where to find unexpected support, whom to contact, what to release. It will not overwhelm you. It will guide you step by step until financial strain dissolves. But the moment you panic, you drown out its voice. Panic is the enemy of intuition. Calm is its companion. If you wish to hear intuition clearly, you must create space for it. Silence is the doorway. Even a few minutes of stillness each morning opens the channel. In that stillness, declare, "Infinite intelligence now directs my ways." Then listen without strain. The subconscious receives this instruction and becomes alert to cues throughout the day. You will find yourself knowing things you did not reason, sensing things you did not analyze, moving toward things you did not plan. This is divine wisdom operating through you. I once advised a man who feared making financial decisions because he carried the memory of past mistakes. I told him, Past mistakes do not predict future outcomes when present consciousness is changed. He began blessing his judgment, affirming that divine wisdom acted through him. Soon he made decisions that benefited him greatly. He said, "I no longer doubt myself." And I replied, "You are no longer listening to fear. You are listening to truth. Your intuition will often lead you to give. Forgiving is a channel opener, but it will also direct you on when not to give. For indiscriminate giving blocks channels as surely as withholding does. Intuition teaches balance. It teaches timing. It teaches trust. And when you follow it faithfully, your prosperity becomes steady, graceful, and secure. Let me offer you a decree that activates intuition. I follow the magic path of intuition. My way is prepared. My steps are ordered. My supply appears in perfect ways. Say this gently throughout the day. You will feel a quietness settle upon your mind, a readiness to be guided, a sense that you no longer walk alone. This is not imagination. It is alignment. You are learning now that prosperity is not achieved by striving but by listening, not by forcing but by flowing, not by panic but by poise. Intuition is the shepherd that leads you out of the wilderness of financial fear and into the green pastures of divine provision. And as you follow, life will begin to astonish you. Opportunities will seem to appear from nowhere. Problems will unravel. Doors will open. Burdens will dissolve. Not because you fought your way out of struggle, but because you walked your way into guidance. Your days of wandering in lack are ending. Your steps are now being directed by a wisdom older than the world. And as you obey its gentle whispers, the payment-to-payment pattern will lose its power over you forever. There is a law that governs the flow of all supply, and many live in lack simply because they have never learned how that law operates. They imagine money comes only through toil, only through wages, only through visible channels, and therefore they cling to these channels with anxious fists. Yet what one clings to in fear cannot multiply. Supply requires openness. It requires circulation. It requires the willingness to let divine mind determine the manner of increase. When a person tries to control every dollar, they shut the very door through which abundance longs to enter. I have often said, there is no loss in divine mind. And this truth is never more important than when dealing with money. People fear losing what little they have, and that fear becomes the magnet that draws more loss. They speak of dwindling funds, shrinking accounts, and insufficient wages, and life obedient as always echoes their decrees. But when a person understands that supply is spiritual first and material second, they release the anxious grip and allow the law of increase to take over. Let me illustrate with a story. A woman once came to me distressed because her bank account was nearly empty. She clutched her purse as though it were her lifeline. I told her gently, "What you hold tightly in fear slips through your fingers. What you bless increases." I instructed her to bless every dollar she spent and to affirm, "The magic purse of the spirit is mine. It is never depleted." At first, she trembled each time a bill arrived. The old fear had deep roots. But as she continued blessing her purse, touching it with gratitude rather than dread, something remarkable occurred. Unexpected income began to appear. A forgotten refund, a friend repaying an old debt, a small opportunity that became a significant source of supply. She came to me weeks later and said, "My purse feels alive." And indeed it was, for she had infused it with faith instead of fear. This is the magic purse principle. When you treat your purse as a symbol of divine abundance, you awaken the law of circulation. What you bless must increase. What you fear must diminish. The purse becomes a vessel of spiritual wealth rather than a container of dwindling funds. It becomes a symbol of alignment rather than survival. Many people repel supply by speaking of how little they have. They confess poverty with each breath, thinking such confession is honesty. But honesty rooted in fear is not truth, it is bondage. Truth says, my supply is infinite, though my present channel may be small. Truth says, the same intelligence that guides the stars guides my affairs. Truth says, I am not dependent on this channel. Many channels are open to me. When you speak these truths, even while appearances contradict them, you activate laws that cannot fail. There was once a man who lost his job and feared losing his home. He spoke constantly of his losses until I told him, what you release, you replace. I instructed him to bless the job he had lost, to thank it for the lessons it had given, and then to declare, what is mine by divine right cannot be taken from me. What is not mine returns to its source. Within a short time, he received an offer far better suited to his gifts. He said, it feels as though the old job had to fall away for this new one to appear. And I replied, exactly. Divine order removes what no longer belongs, so that what is ordained may enter. When people cling to old channels out of fear, they block the new channels. I once told a seeker, do not try to keep alive what divine order is trying to release. The universe is generous, but not sentimental. It does not preserve a thing simply because you have grown accustomed to it. It preserves only what serves your path. When a channel closes, it is because a greater channel is forming. The wise person blesses the closing door and prepares for the opening one. Supply often enters through unexpected routes. I knew a woman who prayed for financial help, but expected it through wages alone. She believed only in the paycheck. Yet intuition kept nudging her to sell her paintings, though she considered them amateurish. I told her, obey the nudge. Supply seeks you through many doors. She reluctantly displayed her work at a small event. To her astonishment, people purchased her paintings eagerly. A gallery expressed interest. Commissions followed. Her new income far exceeded what she had imagined. She said, I never thought supply could come this way. I answered, it came because you removed the block. You allowed divine mind to choose the channel. People often reduce themselves to one stream of income, one employer, one source, forgetting that they are supplied by divine mind, not by human means. When you see your employer as your source, you shrink your world to the size of that employer's ledger. When you see divine mind as your source, the entire universe becomes your treasury. It is not your place to determine how the good will come. Your place is to remove the beliefs that prevent it. A belief in just enough is one of the greatest blocks to prosperity. Many live in a cramped consciousness, expecting only what they need to survive. Their thoughts cannot stretch beyond necessity, yet divine supply is not rationed. It is abundant, overflowing, immeasurable. A person with a small cup receives a cupful. A person with a barrel receives a barrelful. The size of the vessel determines the amount, not the generosity of the source. I once told a seeker who wanted only enough to get by, my dear, you insult your spirit with your small request. I encouraged her to expand her expectation. She began affirming, my blessings overflow. I receive more than I require, that I may bless others. Her income doubled, then tripled. She discovered that generosity flowed naturally from abundance, not from guilt or obligation. She said, I give freely now because I am no longer afraid. And I told her, your giving unlocked the gates of receiving. The law of receiving is tied to the law of giving, but not to forced giving or guilt-driven giving. Giving must be intuitive, joyful, and guided. Some think they must give away what they need in order to receive, but this is misunderstanding. You never give to reduce yourself. You give to expand consciousness. When you give with fear, you shrink. When you give with joy, you grow. The widow's oil multiplied when she shared it. The boy's loaves multiplied when they were offered. What is given in faith multiplies. What is hoarded in fear diminishes. A seeker once told me she could not give because she was too poor. I told her, "You are poor because you do not give." I encouraged her to bless others in small, heartfelt ways, sharing a meal, offering kindness, placing a coin in someone's hand. These acts shifted her energy from contraction to expansion. Within weeks, she reported unexpected income and new opportunities. She said, "It feels as though I stepped into a new world." And indeed, she had the world of circulation. Circulation is the rhythm of abundance. In nature, nothing hoarded thrives. A river that refuses to flow becomes stagnant. A tree that refuses to release old leaves blocks new growth. So it is with money. It must move. It must breathe. It must circulate. When you spend fearlessly, with gratitude, you declare, "There is more where this came from." When you receive gratefully, you declare, "I am worthy of divine supply." Gratitude opens channels that effort cannot. Let me speak of another block: resentment. Resenting the wealth of others shuts the windows of your own opportunity. Many resent the success of neighbors, colleagues, friends, believing it unfair. But resentment is a poison that corrodes the vessel that contains it. When you bless the prosperity of others, you invite prosperity into your own life. A woman once envied her friend's inheritance and came to me feeling ashamed. I told her, "Bless her blessing. What you bless belongs to your consciousness." She began affirming, "What God has done for others, He now does for me, and more." Soon after, she received an unexpected financial gift. She said, "It came through a channel I never imagined," and I replied, "Blessings always come through unimagined channels." Before this section closes, I wish to give you a decree that dissolves financial blocks. I release fear, resentment, and clinging. I open every channel of supply. What is mine comes quickly, easily, and under grace. Speak it with conviction. Speak it with expectation. Speak it until you feel the knot in your chest loosen. For every block within you is dissolving even now. Every dam of fear is cracking. Every limitation is weakening. You are stepping out of the cramped room of financial fear and into the boundless field of divine abundance. What once seemed scarce will become plentiful. What once felt unpredictable will become steady. What once drained, you will begin to replenish you, for you are no longer resisting supply, you are receiving it. There comes a moment in every seeker's transformation when the outer world begins to reflect the inner shift. It may happen subtly at first: a small blessing, a timely encouragement, an unexpected refund, a gentle loosening of fear. But these early signs are the heralds of a greater change. They signal that the subconscious has accepted the new pattern. They signal that the old identity of lack has begun its dissolution. They signal that you have stepped from the wilderness of survival into the early borders of your promised land. Yet many fail to recognize these moments because they look for dramatic fireworks rather than quiet reordering. They expect the Red Sea to part in full view, forgetting that before the waters parted, Moses received only a simple instruction: go forward. To go forward means to persist in truth even when appearances have not yet caught up. It means to hold fast to your new identity, even when the old world attempts to pull you back. It means to guard your consciousness with vigilance, for the early days of increase are the most delicate. Just as a newly sprouted seed must be protected from harsh weather, a newly established prosperity consciousness must be shielded from doubt, gossip, fear, and old habits of speech. I once counseled a woman who experienced a small but meaningful improvement in her finances after declaring, "My supply now appears." She was joyful, radiant, and grateful until a friend remarked, "Well, don't get too excited. These things never last." Within days, her newfound supply vanished, not because the law failed, but because she allowed someone else's unbelief to become her own. When she returned to me distressed, I reminded her gently, "No one can take your blessing unless you hand it over by agreement." She learned then the importance of guarding her consciousness as one guards a treasure chest. Others will treat you differently once you begin to carry yourself. In truth, people respond instinctively to the vibration of confidence, dignity, and expectancy. Those who once overlooked you may now greet you with respect. Those who once doubted your ability may now offer assistance. Those who once ignored your ideas may now listen with interest. This is not flattery. It is reflection. Life reflects the posture of your spirit. A man once told me, "People have begun speaking to me as though I were someone important." I responded, "It is because you have begun speaking to yourself as someone important." His increased income was only a side effect of this transformation. The true change was internal. He had risen in consciousness, and his environment had risen to meet him. It is important to understand that as prosperity begins to manifest, the old consciousness may attempt a final resistance. You may feel unworthy. You may fear that your blessing will be taken away. You may wonder if your good is too good to be true. These thoughts are simply the echoes of the old identity trying to survive. But echoes have no power when you refuse to repeat them. You must answer every whisper of doubt with truth. When the mind says, "This cannot last," you respond, "There is no loss in divine mind." When the mind says, "This is too much for me," you answer, "What God has done for others, He now does for me and more." When the mind says, "I do not deserve this," you declare, "I am worthy by divine right." One of the most powerful laws in the universe is the law of recognition. What you recognize as yours becomes yours. What you fail to recognize slips away. In Scripture, when the disciples did not recognize the risen Christ, they could not receive his blessing until he spoke their names. Recognition is the doorway through which good enters your life. When prosperity begins to appear, recognize it instantly. Bless it. Acknowledge it. Claim it. Say, "This is the pattern of my new life." I once told a seeker, never say, "I can't believe this." Say, "I always knew my good would come," for disbelief interrupts the current, while expectation accelerates it. When you live from payment to payment, doubt becomes habitual. When you enter prosperity consciousness, expectancy becomes habitual. You begin to wake each morning wondering not, "Will anything good happen?" but rather, "How will my good find me today?" This expectancy draws blessings like a magnet draws iron. You will notice that your environment begins to shift in subtle ways. You may feel inspired to clean your home, organize your papers, repair something long neglected. This is not mere tidying. It is the subconscious preparing a larger vessel. Just as Elisha instructed the widow to borrow vessels before the oil poured forth, your consciousness must make room for increase. Prosperity does not enter a cluttered consciousness. When you straighten your environment, you straighten your energy. When you discard the unnecessary, you signal the universe that you are ready for the new. Many people believe they are waiting for prosperity, but in truth, prosperity has been waiting for them to release resentment, waiting for them to forgive old injuries, waiting for them to cease speaking failure. Nothing blocks abundance more effectively than resentment. It is the rust that corrodes spiritual pipes. You may declare prosperity all day long, but if resentment festers within, the channel remains obstructed. That is why one of the most powerful affirmations I have ever given is, I forgive everyone, and everyone forgives me. I am free to prosper. Forgiveness is the solvent that dissolves the hardened deposits of old disappointments. Once released, the flow of supply becomes effortless. Consider this scriptural truth. Before the Israelites could enter the promised land, they had to circle Jericho's walls in silence. Silence is a profound tool in manifestation. It restrains the tongue from speaking doubt during the delicate phase of unfolding. When your good is beginning to form, be careful whom you share it with. There are those who will encourage you and those who will question you. The latter can unsettle your consciousness if you are not yet rooted. I once told a seeker, do not speak your blessing until it becomes strong enough to speak itself. There is also a principle of divine timing. Prosperity may begin to show itself in ways that seem slow or uneven to the natural eye. But the invisible law is exact. It knows the perfect moment, the perfect channel, the perfect sequence. A man once lamented to me that his increase was when he released his urgency and affirmed, my blessings arrive in perfect time. The very thing he sought appeared swiftly. Often the delay is not in the blessing, but in the consciousness that must be prepared to receive it. Be attentive to intuition during this period, for intuition becomes stronger as prosperity approaches. You may feel led to contact someone, to take a small action, to release something old. Follow these nudges without overthinking them. They are the gentle choreography of divine mind, arranging the pieces of your new life. I once told a seeker, every instruction you obey shortens the distance between you and your blessing. You may also notice that others begin to come to you for advice, as though sensing a newfound clarity within you. This is not accidental. Prosperity consciousness radiates an aura of stability. People trust those who trust themselves. They sense that your life is being guided, and they wish to draw warmth from that radiance. Do not shrink from this attention. It is confirmation. It is the world acknowledging that you have stepped into a higher vibration. Remember this law. Nothing external can secure your prosperity. Only inner consciousness can. But once inner consciousness is secured, nothing external can remove it. A man anchored in truth may lose a position, but he cannot lose his supply. A woman rooted in divine order may experience temporary change, but she cannot experience true loss. For what is hers by divine right cannot depart. It can only return in a higher form. As prosperity unfolds, speak often these words. I walk in my new consciousness with ease. My good expands continually. Every day brings visible proof of my inner increase. No one and nothing can block what is mine. These phrases strengthen the roots of your new identity. They stabilize the soil. They align your outer world with your inner shift. And now you stand, not merely at the edge of transformation, but within it. You are no longer one who hopes for prosperity. You are one who carries the consciousness of prosperity. The outer evidence will continue to unfold, but the inner change is already complete. You have left behind the cramped vibration of living from one payment to the next. You are entering the rhythm of divine abundance, where supply flows steadily, peacefully, and without fear. This is the dawn of a new life, a life arranged not by worry, but by wisdom, not by effort, but by alignment, not by scarcity, but by truth. And the law, unfailing and eternal, is now operating on your behalf. There is a moment quiet, unmistakable, sacred when the seeker who has struggled, doubted, calculated, feared, and paced the floor in anxious expectation, suddenly realizes that the power to change their life has never been outside of them. It has always been within. It has been present in every word they have spoken, every picture they have held, every assumption they have rehearsed, every decree they have planted. Once this realization dawns, the seeker is never the same. They no longer plead for supply, they expect it. They no longer chase opportunities, they magnetize them. They no longer measure their worth by numbers, they measure it by consciousness. In that instant, poverty loses its authority, and wealth takes its rightful place not as accumulation, but as identity. For true wealth is not simply the possession of money, it is the possession of a consciousness so aligned with divine order that supply becomes inevitable. When you reach this stage, you discover that life begins to cooperate with you in a strange and wonderful way. Doors open without knocking. Assistance comes without asking. People speak your name in rooms you have never entered. You begin to realize that you are being carried by a law too perfect to fail and too precise to miscalculate. This is the point where the old self, the frightened self, the penny-counting self, the calculating self falls away like a garment outgrown. It cannot survive in the light of truth. It once believed it had to work its fingers to the bone, suffer through endless strain, and brace for the unexpected blow. But now, a deeper knowing has taken its place, the knowing that you are supplied because you are connected to the source of all supply, and the source is unfailing. I once counseled a man who lived for years in the tight grip of financial dread. He feared every bill, he feared every delay, he feared every unexpected expense. He said to me, "I live with the feeling that disaster is always one step behind me." I told him gently, "You are not fearing disaster, you are summoning it by agreement." I taught him to reverse his language, to reverse his assumption, to reverse his inner picture. He began declaring, "Everything in my life works together for my good." He repeated it, even when fear shook his voice. Slowly, something inside him softened. One day, he said, "I no longer feel pursued by disaster. I feel as though I am being guided." That shift alone, before any money arrived, was the true beginning of his prosperity. For outward wealth cannot long remain with one who inwardly expects loss. But outward wealth must rush toward one who inwardly expects support. This is why I often say, you cannot hold abundance within and lack without. Sooner or later, the outer world must reflect the inner decree. It is spiritual law. A person who carries a consciousness of lack could inherit a fortune and still end in poverty. But a person who carries a consciousness of abundance could lose every dime and still rise again swiftly. For wealth is consciousness first, currency second. Another case comes to mind. A woman of modest means began speaking of herself as one who receives unexpected blessings daily. Her friends laughed at her. They said she sounded foolish. Yet the subconscious does not judge a declaration. It only acts upon it. Within weeks, she began receiving gifts, small at first, then larger. A neighbor brought her fresh produce from his garden. A relative sent money without explanation. A local shop offered her free goods as a promotional gesture. She said, "It feels as though the world has suddenly become kind." I replied, "The world is simply echoing your new identity. Identity is the blueprint of your affairs. When you say, 'I am always struggling,' you engrave a blueprint of struggle. When you say, 'I cannot get ahead,' you carve a pattern of stagnation. But when you declare, 'I walk in divine abundance,' you issue a decree that life must obey." Some people resist this teaching because they believe it oversimplifies life. But nothing is simpler or more profound than the law of the spoken word. In Genesis, it is written, "And God said, 'Let there be light,' And there was light. There was no council meeting, no debate, no calculation, only the words spoken and the manifestation appearing. You, made in the image of divine mind, carry a spark of that same creative authority. But most people use that authority to speak darkness rather than light. They say, "It is hopeless. It is too late. Nothing works for me." And life answers, "Very well, let it be done unto you as you have said." One of the most powerful transformations I have witnessed occurred when a man who had lived in chronic debt began declaring daily, "I am a giver and a receiver of great wealth." He had no wealth at the time, yet he spoke from the truth rather than the appearance. His creditors mocked him, his family doubted him, his friends scolded him, but he persisted. Within a year, he had cleared every debt, stepped into a new line of work, and purchased a home. He said, "It feels as though something lifted me." Something did the burden of his old identity, which had weighed upon him like a millstone. To complete your transformation, you must now adopt the consciousness of what I call the unwavering receiver. This is the one who does not question whether their supply will arrive, they assume it. They do not ask, "How will it come?" They simply know, it comes. They do not rehearse their fears, they rehearse their gratitude. They do not watch the calendar, they watch their consciousness. And because their inner world is firm, the outer world becomes steady. Let me tell you a story of unwavering receiving. A woman once asked me how to free herself from the habit of panic. Every month she counted the days until payment, holding her breath until money arrived. I said, "You are not counting days, you are counting fears." I taught her to declare each morning, "I am supplied before I need." She felt foolish at first, for her circumstances contradicted her words, yet she persisted. She said the words slowly, gently, but daily. Soon she found that money began arriving earlier than expected. A payment cleared days before she anticipated. Her employer offered her an advance without her asking. A friend repaid a long-forgotten loan. She came to me astonished. "It happened exactly as I said," she whispered. I replied, "It happened exactly as you believed." Belief is the soil from which manifestation grows, but belief must be nourished. You nourish belief by repeating truth, by rejecting fear, by guarding your speech, by blessing your affairs, and by expecting increase. Expectancy is the open door through which supply enters. Without expectancy, even great blessings may go unnoticed. A man once missed a profitable opportunity because he believed nothing good ever happened to him. He walked past his own blessing. But a person who expects good walks through life with eyes open, heart lifted, and hands ready to receive. Let me speak now of the role of divine timing. Some people sabotage their prosperity by demanding immediate results. They say, "If something does not happen by Friday, I give up." But divine order does not bow to the calendar of fear. It delivers at the perfect moment, never early, never late. The farmer who digs up his seeds each morning in panic will never harvest a crop. Likewise, the seeker who uproots their affirmations with doubt delays their own increase. Say often, "My blessings arrive in perfect time," and then rest. Rest is not idleness. Rest is faith in action. Others fear that their blessing will pass them by, but what is yours by divine right cannot pass you. It may be delayed by fear, blocked by resentment, or tangled by old patterns, but it cannot be lost. If something leaves your life, it is because something better now approaches. Never mourn the removal of what no longer serves you. Bless it and release it, for as long as your hands clutch the old, they cannot receive the new. Before I conclude this teaching, I must speak of generosity. Not forced giving, not fearful giving, not self-punishing giving, but intuitive and joyful giving. When you give from fear, you shrink. But when you give from joy, you expand. And the universe rushes to fill the space you have opened. A seeker once told me she feared giving because she felt she had so little. I said, give not to reduce yourself, but to remind yourself that you are infinite. She began offering small gifts, flowers, a meal, a kind act. Her consciousness expanded with each gesture. Soon her finances expanded too. Before you rise from this lesson, I wish to place a final affirmation upon your lips. Speak it not as a request, but as a decree. I am now aligned with divine abundance. I release the past. I receive my good. I walk in wealth with ease and certainty. Speak it gently. Speak it deeply. Speak it as one who understands that the universe obeys the voice of the awakened soul. You are now stepping out of the narrow corridor of living from one payment to the next. That corridor was never your home. It was merely a hallway you wandered while asleep to your power. But now you are awake. Now you are aligned. Now you are standing in the vast, open field of your true inheritance. Your supply is no longer delayed. Your channels are no longer blocked. Your consciousness is no longer divided. You have crossed into a new life not by force, but by law. And the law, eternal and exact, now fulfills itself through you.